Hey there, this week's challenge item, this layered $1.25 wood pumpkin cutout from the Dollar Tree. Let's do some fall decor. Welcome to my channel, Craft Central Designs. I created 3 different fall decor looks using the layered wood pumpkin cutout from the Dollar Tree. I'm thinking this could be used as a wreath insert, a small sign maybe with an added beaded hanger. And I'm also thinking these would look great as a standing decor on a buffet table or a dessert table. What do you think? I hope you enjoy this tutorial today and perhaps feel inspired to do some creative autumn decor. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy the content, and subscribe if you are not currently a subscriber, and leave me your comments. I love receiving them. Okay, let me show you how I created these autumn decor pieces from the layered $1.25 wood pumpkin cutout from the Dollar Tree. For project number 1, I am going to do a pumpkin in the traditional orange theme color. Now, this wood cutout has sections on the front of the cutout, which we are going to remove because we're going to be using 2 different types of scrapbook paper. And we will do that with a heat gun and a paint scraper. That's what I found best to remove those pieces. And I'm not going to say it's easy to remove them, but it's very doable. So I'll go over that in just a moment. I did 3 of these, and I removed all of the pieces of all 3. And so I'm certain that although it's tedious, it's very doable. So I have some pumpkin orange paint there. That's the Crafters Collection paint. That's Hobby Lobby's brand. And I'm going to just be painting the edges of the sides of that pumpkin. I'm going to be using this beautiful pumpkin scrapbook paper that I got at Hobby Lobby. And then for the background, I'm going to be using these scrapbook papers, one of the 2 of them, I'm trying to say. And there's also another orange piece there that's kind of like a swirl pattern. So I'm going to be covering the back of the pumpkin, but for the front of the pumpkin, I'm going to be using 1 scrapbook paper, and then for the pieces, I'm going to use a different scrapbook paper. I have there a beautiful burlap ribbon that I love. I believe it is 3/4 inches in width. And then I have this beautiful plaid from Hobby Lobby in their autumn decor department, 40% off. I have this beautiful twisted jute cord. It has oranges and a burlap color, and it's very beautiful. And then, of course, these pumpkins, I got 3 of them. Actually, I got 4 because I was a little concerned about getting off those pieces on the front of that pumpkin. So I thought, I better have an extra one just in case I have a little accident. But anyway, so the Crafter Square section, I picked up those, they call them wood dice. Every time I see them when they come into the Dollar Tree, they don't always have them, but often they do. I always pick up a few packages because I find so many uses for them. I have their Mod Podge, a sponge applicator. I put mine in a squirt bottle. I have a Cricut Mini heat press. You don't have to have a Cricut Mini heat press. You can use a regular iron. You just put it on a low setting and with no steam. And you can accomplish the very same thing that I do with my mini Cricut heat press. I have there a pipe cleaner because I'm going to be making a bow. and some florals. Now, these I got at Hobby Lobby, but they do have florals at the Dollar Tree. You could purchase your florals there. They have fillers and leaves and like baby sunflowers. Just take a look at the Dollar Tree florals. I prefer to get mine at Hobby Lobby. Okay, so this pumpkin has 3 pieces on the front. Now, I had to separate them in order to achieve the look that I wanted to with the scrapbook paper. So I used my heat gun and I used that paint scraper. And I found that to do the middle sections, it was not hard at all to get my spatula or my scraper underneath the pieces. But on the tops and the bottom, boy, they glued them. So what I did was just hold my heat gun over the area. I also held it over my scraper because that seemed to help. And I just wiggled and wiggled and wiggled my scraper, and just gradually I was able to pry all those pieces loose. But it is going to take patience. Don't worry if you have some little gouges out of your pumpkin, because you could turn it over and use the back. I do cover both sides. But like I said, it was a little bit tedious, but I found it much more bearable after I turned on the Olympics. And so I just took my time and I worked the pieces off and loosened up the glue so that I could have those 3 sections to cover with scrapbook paper. So as you can see there, the good side and then the side where I removed the wood, I did take a zip sander and sanded that down a little bit, those areas. And then I ended up just going outside and using my orbital sander. And boy, that took care of it real quick. So I smoothed everything out and I was ready to go with my scrapbook paper. Now I'm going to be painting the edges or the sides of that pumpkin with that pumpkin colored Crafters Collection paint from Hobby Lobby. Now I was thinking that this would be a good idea, but then ultimately I'm not even sure I really needed to do it because I was sanding the edges, smoothing out the edges of the scrapbook paper, and I actually ended up just kind of rubbing off the paint anyway. So you could do this part or not do this part. It depends on how finished you want the piece to look. But I think it looked beautiful in the end, just like it was. So I'm going to be using that pumpkin scrapbook paper for the small pieces that go on the top. And then I'm going to use that other scrapbook paper there for covering up that pumpkin. Now I do cover the back. I used a different piece of scrapbook paper for that. Doesn't really matter. You can use whatever. You can use a matching piece of scrapbook paper or a completely different one. So I just go around and I trace the outline of my pumpkin on my scrapbook paper and just cut it out with my scissors. And I do the same thing with the 3 pieces on that orange pumpkin scrapbook paper. I'm going to be placing a generous layer of Mod Podge over my pumpkin and my 3 pieces, and I'm going to let that fully dry. And then I'm going to take my mini Cricut heat press, or you could use an iron, and I'm going to iron over that scrapbook paper with a piece of parchment paper on top of the scrapbook paper, and that's going to reactivate the Mod Podge and give the most beautiful, smooth, finished appearance to those wood pieces with the scrapbook paper. And now I'm just going around cutting out my pieces to put on top of that pumpkin. So I'm just going to recommend that you mix your patterns. I think this creates a really interesting and beautiful looking piece if you do that. But if you're more comfortable doing it by not mixing patterns, using something more subtle on your pumpkin, and then more of a pattern for the smaller pieces, that's fine. You do you. Whatever you like. These are your pumpkins, and you create them however you like. I'm just here for inspiration. Now I'm going over my pumpkin, putting a nice generous layer of Mod Podge all the way out to the edges, all the way throughout the entire piece. Because when you go to press your paper onto the pumpkin, you will want a nice even adherence of that scrapbook paper. So I'm doing that on the pumpkin. I also do the back the same way. And then for the pieces, I do those as well, covering them with a generous layer of Mod Podge, letting it dry. And then all of them collectively, I'm going to press at the same time, or in the same time frame. Okay, so I'm going to place my pieces on my wood, my scrapbook pieces on my wood, and then I'm going to put the parchment paper down. And I have my mini Cricut heat press all warmed up and ready to go. And remember, if you use an iron, no steam, low setting. And I just go over the entire piece of each of those sections, the 3 sections, as well as the pumpkin. And then I did turn the pumpkin over and do the back side as well. And this creates the most beautiful, smooth application of that scrapbook paper onto the wood. Now I am going to use a zip sander. You could use a sanding block as well. They have them at the Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to go around the edges with that sanding block. And remember, or that zip sander, I'm using the zip sander. I do have a sanding block too, but I'm using the zip sander here. And then you just apply the zip sander or the sandpaper to the piece on the downward motion. Don't saw back and forth. Just come across the piece on the downward motion. And this will clean up those edges and make them so smooth. Okay, now I'm going to be taking some Aleene's Tacky Glue and gluing down the pieces that go on the front of that pumpkin. Now you'll notice a little bit of shading around the edges of those pieces, as well as shading around the outside of the pumpkin. I realized that when I was getting ready to edit that I must not have filmed that, but it's quite simple. You just take a spouncer or a little dauber or dabber, whatever you want to call it, and you just dip it in some Waverly antiquing wax, and then dry brush or dry sponge off most of the antiquing wax on a paper towel, and just lightly go around the edges of your piece just by dabbing a little bit of that antiquing wax. And you can do this or not do this, it's your choice. I just felt like it added a little bit of depth and dimension to the piece. So I did around the 3 pieces, as you can see there, and also around the entire perimeter of the pumpkin. And as you can see there, I am wrapping my stem using hot glue to secure that beautiful autumn twine with the orange twine twisted within that cord. So pretty. This is in the autumn section at Hobby Lobby. And look how pretty that is. All right, so our pumpkin is coming along just great. Now it's time for a bow. I'm going to take that beautiful burlap ribbon. It's a very soft, very pretty burlap type of a ribbon. And I'm going to create a little 4-loop bow. I want to say my loops are around 4.5 inches. And I'm just going to create 2 loops on each side, twisting and folding over the loops. Then I'm going to take a little pipe cleaner and secure those loops in the center. A pipe cleaner of the same color of that burlap ribbon. And I'm just going to cut off the tail. And I left my tails around 5 inches because I wanted the option of having the tails cascading down the pumpkin. I wasn't sure exactly how long I wanted them. So I left them around 5 inches initially. And I do trim them up a little bit later. So I have the bottom layer of my bow now. And it's going to go up at the top on the left-hand side, nestled in between the pumpkin and the stem. Now I'm going to use that plaid ribbon, very, very pretty plaid ribbon from Hobby Lobby. 40% off. It's a wired ribbon. And I'm going to create a 4-loop bow. I'm going to make these loops around 4 inches, so they're just a tiny bit smaller than the burlap bow. And I'm going to be placing that right on top of that burlap bow. Putting the pipe cleaner around the bow to secure the loops. Pull the tails down and cut that ribbon off from the spool. Now I won't need the pipe cleaners on the back of the burlap ribbon because I'm gluing it to the pumpkin, but I'm going to take the pipe cleaners of the plaid ribbon and wrap those around the burlap bow and twist it in the back, and now they're adhered to one another. Now this bow is really perfect for a good match for the pumpkins in that scrapbook paper. And we're also mixing patterns, which I love. I'm going to be popping a pine cone, a little baby pine cone, in the center of that bow. And that's going to be part of the embellishments that I place at the top of this pumpkin. I'm going to be hot gluing that on, and I'm placing it right at the very top of the pumpkin, at the base, right there, at the base of the stem. And I tilt it a little bit sideways. You don't want it sitting straight on the piece. And I make sure that it's pressed down and adhering well. Now you're going to be using some embellishments for the top of this piece. Now, hopefully you have some florals that you could just pick off some leaves or berries or pine cones or whatever the case may be to add to your piece. These pumpkins only take a small amount of embellishments. So I just went to my stash and found what I could to really dress it up. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue my pine cone right in the center of the bow. I am going to use some leaves. I'm also going to use some Excelsior on here. I love using that on autumn pieces. And I'm going to just add a few little embellishments around. Now this is totally up to you what you use on your piece. So you just want it to coordinate well with whatever scrapbook paper you used, and coordinate, of course, as well with your ribbons. Now, this particular leaf is one of my absolute favorites from Hobby Lobby. It's a smaller leaf. You could also go with a maple type leaf if you like. Again, you just want to be careful to, have your leaves coordinate with your scrapbook paper. Sometimes in the store, it depends on, which bunch of autumn leaves you're looking at, but sometimes they're a very bright, almost a fluorescent orange. So you really have to be careful about that because the scrapbook papers are not going to be that bright orange. So it might be a good idea if you have your scrapbook papers with you when you go to the department to pick out your ribbons and your florals, unless you already have some at home, in which case, hopefully you remember the shade of orange. But that does happen with some of the florals. I think even Hobby Lobby has some of those very almost fluorescent orange, and that's not even realistic to autumn colors. So just be careful of that. Just a word to the wise. Okay, so I'm sticking some Excelsior in there. I just kind of work it in my fingers, spread it out just a little bit, take a little bit of hot glue, and just poke it here and there underneath the bow loops. And that's it. It's that easy to dress up the top of your pumpkin. Now you can see I covered the back, so everything is nice and finished. Now I have one of those wood dice, and I just place it on the table when I glue it together so that I have a good level adherence to the pumpkin. So I put my dice down on the table, and then I look for the center of the pumpkin. I push the pumpkin up against the dice and let that glue set. Now on that piece, I believe I used 3 pine cones and just some other little bits and pieces of embellishments. But look how pretty, and it stands up all on its own. I just think these would be lovely if you created like a set of them, maybe 3 or 4, and maybe do them all in like an orange and golden yellow theme, but change up the scrapbook papers on each one of them. I think that would be so pretty. You could put them on a dessert table, on the back, lined up on the back of a buffet table. Just saying, I think that would be really pretty. I think that's a great idea. What do you guys think? Okay, now, so the new trend is blue in autumn decor. And this started last season, and it's continuing on this season. So I'm going to do a blue theme pumpkin. So I'm going to use that gingham check in that pretty blue color. And I'm going to use that for the 3 pieces that go on top of the pumpkin. So again, I'm just tracing everything out. I'm going to cut it out just like I did for the other pumpkin. I'm going to Mod Podge it on just like I did for the other pumpkin. And then for the pumpkin itself, the scrapbook paper that I'm going to use is a blue floral. It has some green leaves. So I just did the same, traced it, cut it out. I'm going to put Mod Podge all over my pieces and all over my pumpkin. I do cover the back. I actually use a different scrapbook paper for the back, but I kind of like that, having a different scrapbook paper on the back. And I just showed you a stack of narrow ribbons. I'll show you what we're going to do with those. So I'm going to, as I mentioned, do the Mod Podge, and I'm going to be using the Cricut heat press to do the application of the scrapbook paper, just like I did for the first pumpkin. I use the smoothest side of the pumpkin But as I mentioned, I used my orbital sanders, so all of mine were pretty smooth. But I was particular about that because I didn't want to chance having any marks from the wood showing on the scrapbook paper. So again, I'm doing my reactivating of my Mod Podge, going around the entire piece all the way out to the edges. And what a beautiful, smooth application this is. I'll be using my zip sander to clean up my edges. All 3 pumpkins are done in this same manner with the Mod Podge. But with the 3rd pumpkin, I have one little variation, and I'll go over that when we get to it. So I'm doing my top pieces, and I'm going to clean up my edges. I'm going to use Aleene's Tacky Glue. By the way, they have that in the Crafter Square section at the Dollar Tree. You can also get a sanding block in the hardware department. I think I did mention that, though. So you could do these projects, with the exception of the scrapbook paper, from items solely from the Dollar Tree. They do have florals. They do have autumn ribbons. They just don't have scrapbook paper. So that you could get at Hobby Lobby or Michael's or Joann's. Every other week, it's 40% off at Hobby Lobby. So I have everything all glued on. I'm using my clips to hold that until it dries. And I have an assortment of narrow ribbons here. I have 3 different white ones. Well, actually, I have 2 white ribbons and some rickrack. I have this blue ribbon. It's very sheer, but I'm still going to use it, from the Dollar Tree. And I have a blue gingham check from the Dollar Tree that I'm definitely going to use. And then I have a couple of other ribbons in the greens that I got at Joann Fabrics. So what I'm going to be doing is a scrappy bow, or a messy bow, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to be cutting 6-inch pieces of ribbon. I cut about 3 to 4 of each of the colors, or each of the varieties of ribbon that I have there. And I'm just going to be creating kind of a messy bow for the top of that pumpkin. So I go ahead and I cut out all of my ribbons. Now this ribbon is very sheer, which is why I didn't really want to make a loopy bow with it. So I decided to just use a lot of the ribbons that I already had in my ribbon collection or stash, and just make a messy bow with it. And it looked really super cute on top of that pumpkin. I was lucky to find that gingham check. I picked that up at the Dollar Tree. They do have narrow ribbons. They have burlap ribbons. They have autumn ribbons. And as I mentioned, they have plenty of autumn florals. So I went ahead and cut all of my ribbons. Then I'll show you how I'm going to stack them and what I do next. That green ribbon is so pretty, and it matches the green of the leaves in the scrapbook paper that's adhered to that pumpkin. So I'm bringing in all the colors of my scrapbook papers, as I mentioned before, through my ribbons and through whatever pieces of floral materials that I use. Now I'm just stacking my ribbons. See how I stack it in different directions? And I alternate my colors and my patterns. And then I'm just simply going to take a little piece of white pipe cleaner, and I'm going to wrap it around the center, and all of my little ribbon strips will be collected. And I will be placing that at the top of my pumpkin. Now I'm going to trim all that up later once I get it on the piece. Twist it in the back a couple of times. And I will be just doing a little angle cut on the end of my ribbons. I certainly wouldn't dovetail this. It's not really that type of a bow. So I'm just going to be cutting a little bit now, but more so when I get it on the piece. Now I'm going to be placing that in the exact same location at the top of the pumpkin, at the base of the stem, and in the center of that messy bow, if you will, I'm going to put that little white pumpkin that comes on a floral bush that I'll show you here in just a minute, that I got from the Dollar Tree. Now, the blues aren't perfect, but that's okay. It actually looks just very pretty in the end. Now, if you have trouble with folded leaves that you purchase, especially at the Dollar Tree, they always seem to be folded or crinkled. Just use a heat gun and hold it up to the leaf very briefly, and it will take the wrinkles right out. Don't put them on the piece with wrinkles. That's a no-no. Don't do that. Okay, so now we're going to wrap the stem. I just used a jute cord from the Dollar Tree. I start the jute cord with a little dab of glue on the back, and you can see the scrapbook paper that I used on the back there. And I just wrapped the entire stem. Now I'm going to use some hot glue and place my little messy bow at the top of my pumpkin on the upper left-hand side, right at the base, nestled right up next to that pumpkin stem. And now I'm just giving my ribbons a little trim there. You could also, if you had like some muslin or some kind of fabric that you could tear in narrow strips, you could do that as well. And just include that in your ribbon, your little messy bow. I'm sorry, my hand's just a little bit out of frame there. I'll be back here in just a second. And I'm going to place that pumpkin with a little bit of hot glue right in the center. Not straight into the bow, but more like tilted. And then on that floral bush or stem that I got at the Dollar Tree, there was some little blue and green little berries and some leaves as well, of course. I'm going to be using those on the piece. I'm also going to be using some Excelsior. And I'm just going to be poking that in underneath the embellishments. We're just going to use a little bit of hot glue. And that's going to hold everything on secure. And then I'm going to place my leaves on. And I put those underneath the tails of my ribbons. And again, sorry, I'm out of frame. I'm getting used to a new holder for recording, and I'm just it's taking me like a day to get used to it. I apologize. I had to keep checking myself there. But I'll get better, I promise. So I'm going to take some of those little berries. They were actually mixed together. It was greens and blues, which was really great. because I have the green and the blue and that scrapbook paper on the pumpkin. So I'm just going to place those around the pumpkin. I believe I also used some those little white berries that I had gotten off of another floral bush. But again, you do you. You place whatever you want on your pumpkins. I did not do any shading with antiquing wax on this. You do you if you like the look of that. I just did it on the orange pumpkin. Now I am placing those little berries. Doesn't take much florals to embellish these pieces. So it's basically just bits and pieces of stems that you probably already have. Hopefully, won't have to buy anything to complete these, except maybe the scrapbook paper and, of course, those layered pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. And it's nice and finished on the back. I like the idea of putting the scrap paper, if I can talk, on the back. So I put my hot glue on my little wood dice, placed the pumpkin up against it, held it there for it to dry, and now I have a stand-up pumpkin. And I really like that. I like the blue pumpkin, something different. Okay, now something really probably very unexpected. I have this beautiful scrapbook paper that I got at Hobby Lobby. It has trees, rusty colored leaves. It has some gold. It has some earthy tones. I love it. I think it's the most beautiful scrapbook paper. I am going to put that scrapbook paper, if I can speak, on my pumpkin. Yes, I'm putting trees on my pumpkin. So, you shouldn't be surprised if you follow my channel that I'm doing something a little bit unusual, you might say, because I like that. I like unique and different and kind of outside the creative box. So I'm going to trace my pieces that I need for both the layers of my pumpkin, the pieces on the top and the pumpkins on the bottom, or the flat pumpkin. Now that other scrapbook paper that you saw there is a most beautiful scrapbook paper. It's one of the higher end, more expensive scrapbook papers. I believe it's $1.99, but you can get it 40% off on the sale weeks. You've seen me, if you follow my channel, use that scrapbook paper on my Easter bunnies, my wood Easter bunnies. I used it on wood hearts. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I thought, I'm going to use that on a pumpkin. So I went ahead and prepared my pumpkin with the Mod Podge. Now I'm doing my pressing to reactivate my Mod Podge. And that just created the most beautiful application of those trees on my pumpkin. Now, I did do both sides with the same paper on this one. Now, here's that beautiful scrapbook paper. Now, I am not going to press this paper because it has a little bit of a puffy texture, and I didn't want to take a chance on flattening out the design on that scrapbook paper by ironing it. So I'm just putting a generous layer of Mod Podge on, and I'm just going to put that paper directly on the moist Mod Podge. And that's going to go on top of my tree scrapbook paper. And it just has the most beautiful texture, the most beautiful pattern. And it's a beautiful, it's like an off-white, almost iridescent off-white. It's very, very pretty. So this is my my kind of outside the box design for a pumpkin, but I wanted to do something different and unique. And I love it, the way it turned out. Now this rusty orange ribbon goes beautifully with the rusty orange leaves on the trees of that scrapbook paper. So I was very happy to be able to use that ribbon on this piece. I'm going to wrap the stem with that off-white jute cord. And look what I found in my stash from last autumn season, last year. These were at the Dollar Tree. And they are the most beautiful acorns. And I haven't seen them yet this year, but I'm telling you, if I see them, I'm buying like 10 bags. I just love them. They are so pretty. So I'm going to use this, obviously, due to the excitement that I'm exhibiting. I'm sure you realize I'm going to use those on this piece because they go beautifully with the colors on that scrapbook paper. So I'm going to create a little 4-loop bow. I'm going to leave a 5-inch tail, 4 to 5-inch tail. I'm just going to create small loops of about 4.5 inches. I'm going to create a 4-loop bow, pinching my loops in the center, folding over, pinching in the center. And then I'm going to secure those 4 loops with a piece of pipe cleaner. I always try to use colors of pipe cleaner that also coordinate with the project and the colors I'm using on the project. So I'm going to put that at the top of the pumpkin, and I'm also going to make another bow to put on top of that. I'm going to use that pretty burlap again because that scrapbook paper has a lot of earthy tones, so that that burlap colored ribbon is perfect. So I'm going to do a 4-loop bow with my loops a little bit smaller, maybe 3.5 to 4 inches. I'm going to wrap a piece of pipe cleaner around it and cut off the tail the same length at 5 inches. And that acorn, oh my gosh, is going to look so good in the center of that bow. Now, I'm not going to use a pipe cleaner to adhere these 2 bows together. I'm just going to use a little dab of hot glue, and that will suffice. And I hope you feel inspired to do something with these wood pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. They really are so fun. They're so fun to do. And there's actually a number of uses for them. So I hope you find a use for them, to make them in your, to include in your fall decorating. So I have my pieces all glued to my pumpkin. I have my stem wrapped. Now I'm going to apply my bow in the same spot, upper left, nestled right in that little groove where the stem is. And I have my bow kind of sitting a little bit on top of the pumpkin rather than just glued straight forward on the pumpkin, if that makes any sense. And notice how I do tilt my bow a little bit. I don't put it straight on the piece. I tilt it off to the side. And I just use hot glue. I'll trim my tails up a little bit. I am going to ripple my tails on that rusty orange bow and then turn up the tips. I angle my tails. And see how I turn the tips up? And I have the back all finished. And now I'm going to apply that beautiful acorn Boy, that just goes so pretty on this piece. And I tilted it a little bit. Glued that right in the center. See how pretty that looks? I didn't put Excelsior on this one. This pumpkin has a little bit different creative vibe, so I wanted to change that up, and I didn't use the Excelsior, but I did use some of those autumn leaves, not maple type autumn leaves, but my favorite autumn leaves. You'll see me using them here in just a moment. And I'm going to take some of those little white berries and apply some of those. That picks up the white and the scrapbook paper. And there's those leaves that I was referring to. Now I'm going to be placing those and tuck them underneath the loops of the bow. And I just pop my embellishments here and there around the bow. And just using hot glue. I did have one of my leaves kind of trailing down the front of my pumpkin. But you do you, however you want to apply your embellishments. But that's what really makes these pieces outstanding, is what you use on them and how you apply them and the colors that you use. Okay, so I have this wire. It's like a paper-covered wire. I got it in the fall department at Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to be making some little coiled wires, kind of like the effect of tendrils coming from that you see coming from a pumpkin. I'm going to do a longer one and then a shorter one, and I just use a pencil and wrap a paper-covered wire around it. And then I'm just going to insert that right in between the layers of my bow. And that's a little extra touch that I added to this piece. What would we do without hot glue? Oh my gosh. I don't know if that would just be something else to try and craft without hot glue. I can't even remember when I didn't have a hot glue gun. I've been crafting for a very long time, but yeah, it's a great invention. And you're definitely going to appreciate the heat gun too when you go to take off those pieces. Patience, everyone. You have to have patience when it comes to taking those off. But it's worth it, especially if you're going to do a few of these, to just take your time, just go through the process. Okay, time for the wood dice. Apply the glue, stand it up, the pumpkin next to the dice, press it together and hold, and there you have pumpkin number 3. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you feel inspired to perhaps make a pumpkin or several for yourself. Let me know in the comments which was your favorite. One last look at how pretty these turned out. I hope you feel inspired to make some, or 1, or 2, or 3, or however many. Maybe make one for a gift. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the content. And let me know what you think of these pieces in the comments. I love receiving them. And until next time, you all take care.